Okay,
Anyway,
we started recording.
Okay, great. I would like to thank Shahar and Brand for the base camp coming online and for the rollouts by Shahar to introduce us to it. I've been trying to play around with it and put some things online, and I find it pretty easy to use once I do everything the first time. So hopefully everybody will find it useful. Okay, on to committee reports. We'll start with Common Land. Buck is not feeling well, but Derek, could you give us a little report?
Yes, hi. So we've got Chad got his barred owl house put up. Looks pretty cool if you want to check it out on the lower meadow. Also added a couple of items to the working list for this week. Both ruts outside of Lane's house, across from Lane's house, and then some by the garden. And then also we'll have a pile out there by the garden that we'll be chopping up either between now and workday or on workday. We'll need to get some folks over there to distribute that to yard bends. And I believe that's it for this week.
Okay, great, thank you. Community life, Brand.
Yeah, so I've been lazy. I haven't done a lot. We do have some activity. Jonathan has asked a lot of people for various items. Jonathan, do you have any more to say about the things that you're going to be scheduling?
Only that this week I'm going to set up a schedule.
Okay, great. And while I have you, let me show you what I did a couple of weeks ago. Okay, and so we have all of these things to do that are identified, and then we had various people in the group go back and mine all of the things that we have done in the past decades. Community life over the past decade has just been enormously powerful. So if you have any interest in any of these items on the list, please let me know right away. This is the, I sent out the link to this some time ago. I'll send that again. We do have some Solterra seminars scheduled. Here are those. Judith will be talking, Kelly will be talking, a couple by Ricky, and then Preston is going to do a book report, but nothing until February. So if you have something you'd like to talk about, let me know right away so we can start filling in the dates. And that's it for now.
Great, thank you, Brand.
Sure.
Sue is the Common House Chair, and she is in Atlanta for Wesley's birthday, but she sent me a report to read. She says not much to report. The cleaners are cleaning. Solterrans are using the space as per the plan. More chairs have been reupholstered and work on this continues. Thanks to Tom for all of the removal of old fabric and foam, and to Vicky for the loan of her electric knife for foam cutting. Bennett's beautiful tree in the corner bloomed recently, emitting a beautiful scent. At the next spruce up day, 1 to 2 people could be useful to do outside tidying. Details to come. So that's the report from Sue. Any comments or questions about any of those committee reports?
Yes, that tree, or whatever you call it, is not mine. Sandy Bisbee brought that to the Common House.
Ah, nice, thank you. Okay, we're going to move on then to the Path Committee. And I'm going to ask Cheryl to facilitate the meeting for us so that we stay on a time schedule as well as we can so that the meeting ends on time. So Cheryl, if you would unmute, and you have something to say, I believe.
Sure, thank you. And if the Paths Committee wants to add anything to what I say, please feel free. So the Paths Committee is going to give us a presentation of their findings. They've been doing this for a couple months now. And so this is not, today's presentation is not going to be followed by a discussion. If you have questions, please write them down, and you could send them to Jennifer, who's taking notes as well as taking the questions. And they will be answered by the Paths Committee in a comprehensive document. Just that they've been working so hard, and I feel like we owe it to them to also take time to consider what they've found. So opinions and reactions should probably come at the February meeting when we're going to discuss this at length. But for now, it's just a presentation, information, and just take it in. And at the bottom right of each slide is the page number or the slide number. So if you have a question for a specific slide, you could write down that number, and that way the Path Committee can have a better idea of the context of your question.
Great, thank you, Cheryl. Okay, I'm going to,
Nancy, before you start, can you mute everyone else, please?
yes,
Thank you.
actually, Brand,
Oh,
can you do that?
oh, that's interesting. Looks expensive though, so many, so close.
I see, I need to unmute. Okay. So I'm going to give a little introduction first. And, why is there, wait a minute, I have to close this. Hang on one second. Okay, so why is there a Paths Committee? In 2018, our community chose to begin accumulating money in a capital improvement fund for something that's not covered by the community reserves. We, the community, worked really hard through a lengthy process to identify things that we want for our community, and Paths improvement was the choice of the community. About a year ago, the Paths Committee was formed to look into the possible choices for a revitalized, beautiful path through Solterra. The Paths Committee members are split up into 3 subcommittees. The Paths Surface group is Nancy and Tom. The lighting group is Alan, Nate, and Brand. And the drainage group is Matt, Tom, and Audrey. The first thing we did was try to talk about what are the criteria for new paths or renewed paths for Solterra. These are not necessarily in any particular order, but we wanted it to be easy to maintain. We wanted a path that was durable and had a long lifespan. We want it to be beautiful. We want it to have an appropriate environmental impact. We want it to be accessible, for instance, for bikes to ride on it. Maybe people with rollators or in wheelchairs could use it as well. And it needs to be affordable. So tonight's goal is to present information to you about drainage, lighting, and path surfaces. We want to gather questions that you have that will help you make a decision. And we want to talk about what the next steps in decision-making are for this major project. Our hope is that during the first quarter, this is kind of, very wishful thinking, but this is what we hope for, what we wish for, is that in the first quarter that we'll receive approval from the community to move ahead with one of the options for a new beautiful path. During the second quarter that we would finalize financing and sign contracts, and that in the third quarter work would start and end. So just some random notes that we are going to send these presentations to you in electronic form after tonight's presentation. We're using a meeting facilitator, as Cheryl said, to help us gather information and questions. You can ask questions verbally after each section of the presentation, through the chat feature during the Zoom meeting, via email after the meeting, and in person if you see any of the Path people around. We'll answer these questions prior to the February meeting. And in order to allow as many people as possible to raise their questions tonight, we'd ask you to stick to questions and not discussions. We welcome your questions to help us do our work, and we will be having many discussions in the future. So tonight's format is this introduction. Then the drainage group is going to talk about drainage related to the path. Following that, we'll have a 5-minute period to gather questions from you. Then the lighting group will talk and another 5-minute questions. And then the paths surfaces group will make a presentation with a 10-minute question period afterwards. And then we'll have a quick wrap up and notes on the next steps. So I'm going to stop sharing. And first is our drainage group. So Matt, can you take it away?
All right, thank you, Nancy. So there's 3 phases to this project: drainage, lighting, and the surfaces. And we're gonna have to fix a few drainage issues that are relevant to the paths before any of the other stuff can start. So that's why I'm going first. We want to share screen.
Okay.
Can everybody see that?
Yeah.
All right, so the drainage issues I'm gonna present. So we want to convert Solterra from what it is now, which is a wet mess whenever it rains, and today is a perfectly good example of how much mud that we have, into the idyllic community that we know we can have, where the grass is dry and there's not mud everywhere. So to identify the areas that were going to be necessary to fix drainage so that it wouldn't destroy the future paths or interfere with the lighting installation, we got about 3 different contractors that came out and walked the pathways. And they identified 3 different areas that we want to do some remediation on for drainage. Problem areas 1, 2, and 3. Problem area 1 is kind of between the fish box and us over here, and the water accumulates here and pours over the pathway and erodes it and destroys it. So the solution that they found there is to install in these yellow locations a brick and mortar catch basin, similar to the ones that we have in other parts of the community, like this one on the right. Brick and mortar catch basin with a grate, a larger pipe that will go underneath so that it can carry the water. It'll be a little bit lower down so that the water won't pond up on the high side. Another catch basin, if you can see my pointer moving, on the meadow side, and then it's going to go underground to tap into the sidewall of this brick and mortar catch basin at the lower part of the meadow in the middle. That is supposedly going to catch water that comes off the surface of the meadow. They're going to retailer this after they put the pipe in, and it will dump the water down into here and then down Blue Bottle Lane underground to the forest. The second problem area that they identified is over here between Lois and Alan, Annie and Josh, and Patricia and Vicky. There's an existing catch basin that's hard to see where I'm waving my mouse that collects water on the north side of the path. It goes underneath to another catch basin that's here, which catches water on either side on the south side of the path, and then goes between the 2 houses all the way out to Solterra Way and dumps into the backside of an existing brick and mortar catch basin there. So this conduit has collapsed a bit, and it's not clear whether it's got a hole in it or whether it's just erosion on the side that's causing the problems. So they want to excavate and determine what the cause of the problem is, do the appropriate repair, whether it's replacing or restoring. And they've got some ideas about that. The third problem area is probably the largest one. And this is over by Audrey Wynn and Alan Perlman, and then the Karen Mitchell's vacant lot here and Karen Mitchell here. So this is an area that receives a lot of water. So if you walk the pathway, you'll see that from Audrey and Alan's side and the Nielsen side, downhill goes from the left to the right. And also from back here where Shahar and Neva and Cheryl and Pete and the Nielsens are, water runs downhill towards Solterra Way out here. So those 2 things combined create a lot of damage to this path because it's kind of a dam for the water to get around. Initially, over a decade ago, this riprap was put down in the upper right-hand panel to break up the water flow so it wouldn't flow quite as fast. It's not got the capacity that it needs, so it spills over and destroys the path, as you can see here, that we're all familiar with. All of this has to get repaired before we can install a new path. Their goal is to collect the water underground with catch basins in the yellow rectangles. And then when we get down to the end, like in the lower right-hand corner here, go underneath the path into this grassy area and go underground to the back of an existing cast iron and concrete catch basin that's over here. They believe that will solve all those problems, and that's what has been identified to date. And I guess I can take questions if people want to, or we can discuss however you guys want to run that part of the meeting before we go into lighting and path surfaces.
Yes, we are open to questions now, not lengthy discussions, but we have 5 minutes to gather questions. So what kind of questions do people have? And I don't have,
I see Judith's hand up.
thank you.
Yeah, did you look at the report that we spent $2,000 on a consultant studying the drainage area around here?
We have that in the archive. Mark Moldenauer, I believe, is the person that did that, and he did not come out to look at the paths this time around. But yes, it's part of the consideration.
One other area, I don't remember all the details because it was a long time ago, but there's a lot of water come through my lot and, you know, up here that's trying to find its way down to Blue Bottle. And so it's, I don't know what impact it's having on the path, but there are certainly a lot of wet spots on that path behind my house.
So that's one of the questions that we'll try to address then, Judith, as we answer questions for coming up. So you're identifying the area behind your house as being very wet.
I don't know. I think that something needs to be done to get the water probably under the path, but I'm not sure.
Okay,
So Nancy, the next person is Ricky.
go ahead, Ricky.
Thank you. So my question also is about an area that I was surprised not to see identified, which is the area between Sherry and Guy's house and the common house. Because whenever it rains, there's like a huge puddle of water there. And personally, the lack of lights and the lack of drainage there keep me from using the paths. And I also want to say, and I should have led with this, thank you for all the work you've done to even make this presentation.
Thank you. Again, we'll add that to the list of areas. I think people will be bringing up a number of different areas and not saying this about that particular area, but some areas may be improved by a new path too. So I know there are some areas of the paths that the path itself is low and is ponding. So, but we would like to have a list of places that people are concerned about.
Next person is Betsy. Betsy, you need to unmute yourself, please.
Yep, just did. So question I have is, Matt, everything that you've presented, it would be considered gray infrastructure, in other words, hard infrastructure. Has there been any consideration for using green infrastructure, things like rain gardens? I'd like to propose that we do consider that because I think that would be a nice addition and could take care of some of these other places as well.
I agree, it probably could. I think this other stuff will have to be installed first.
Right. Yeah, I agree. A combination is probably what we need, but you know, certainly with the green infrastructure, that would be work that we could do ourselves in common lands too. So
Great, thank you,
save
Betsy.
us some money. Yeah,
We'll put that on our list of questions. Thank you very much.
Last hand is Jennifer. Jennifer, if you can unmute yourself, please.
My question is somewhat similar to Betsy's. It was just about whether any consideration or the contractors have given any consideration to, or the committee to collecting water to keep it from running into the forest, into Hollow Rock. I understand that it's collecting and getting it off the property, but I'm wondering about considering what to do without water to be a good steward, if that was, and if that could be taken into consideration. And thank
Okay.
you to the past committee so much for all the work.
Great. Good. Thank you. We'll add that to the list as well. Any other questions for the drainage? Okay.
If I could throw one in real quick, I didn't raise my hand, but this is Nathan, and I'm on the committee. But it just also occurs to me, I realized, you know, as the new neighborhood is being built, I have no idea what their runoff plans are, but we could end up with a giant mud soup bowl back behind our thing, which makes it pretty much inaccessible half the year. So I am also just putting a second note in for interest in not whatever we can do to limit our contribution to that.
Great, thank you. All
Right,
right. Yes,
one
there's
real
Tricia.
quick. I just wanted to make sure, looking at that space that's on the path right behind our house, that the folks who were looking at it know that when we added that path that goes from the shared path to the garden that goes between our house and Jennifer and Brett's house, and we put in new driveways there, that both of those driveways drain into a French drain, goes over my path side yard and feed into that catch basin. And that's what we were told to do when we did solve the drainage problems.
That was discussed, Patricia.
Okay, sorry, I missed. Sorry, I got here late.
Not at this
There's
meeting,
just
but
a
it was
whole lot of
discussed.
water feeding into that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, we didn't talk about that during the meeting, but that is something that the contractors are aware of and was included in the planning. So thank you very much for that. Anybody else? Okay, the next portion then is talking about lighting, and that is Alan. Are you going to do that part for us, Alan, or?
Alan or Nate, either one.
Alan or Nate. Nate, do you have the slides for that?
I do not.
Okay, well, I'll go ahead and share my screen if Nate, you want to talk. I don't want to keep my mic open because I've got a parakeet problem.
Cool. Is Alan on the call? I'd love if he could do it if he's on the call. But
Alan, do you want to do it? Okay, so Alan, I've got the slides up. Do you want to talk or what?
Okay, yeah, I'll talk.
Thanks, Alan.
Okay, so I assume by this point everybody was aware we had 2 demonstrations this year of lighting. The first is there anybody who didn't see the demonstration? Either of them? I'd be curious. Okay, so the first one, we had maybe 4 or 5 different kinds of lighting. There was what you call path lighting, which is of the 18-inch tall, approximately 18. You can set it at whatever height you want with a little shade so that you would have to get on your hands and knees to actually see the light bulb. And these are spaced approximately every 45 feet on our pathways. The lighting that was additional was we had lighting that was put, say, up lighting to show off a tree. We had lighting that was on a pole at the 10-foot level, also 10 or 12-foot tall lighting in trees. What ends up happening is when you have lighting like that, what we call this down lighting from trees, is that when you're walking on the pathway, the light shines into your eyes. So there were comments where people basically said that wasn't really a very good way because you get blinded, your pupils temporarily contract, and then when you're out of the light, you can't see. So it seemed that the comments in general, people really liked to have the lights that were what we call path lights. It's got about a 4-inch diameter shade. And we have to go for the next slide, if you would, Brand. This is an example, the second one from the left. That's what we call path light. As you can see, they can be spaced at intervals. I originally spec'd like 72 of them, and then we cut it back by walking it with the lighting guy another time, and discovered that you really didn't need to have it to be so close together, because it would light up, once again, it would glare off the surface of the path. And the idea being that lighting that would illuminate the path, but would not shine up into your eyes or into the sky, and it would be minimal. When we said we cut back to 45 lights, it also cut the budget on the project. And this is a lighting system that is there's 5, basically there would be a transformer located at the common house that would be outside in a container, basically a cabinet. That each of the pathways would have its own lighting, so that if there was a problem with one, it wouldn't affect the other pathways. We could probably handle easily triple the amount of lights that are currently being spec'd. And this means that lighting can be spliced in at a later date and added. And so it turned out the second demonstration, which was around Halloween, had to do with just the path lighting, since everybody seemed to coalesce around that concept. So at the moment, and this is a 12-volt system, it doesn't hurt anybody. It can be spliced into and put on either side of the path. It doesn't have to go just on one side. And that's easy to expand. So we did flag it, and it turned out that many people's pathway from their house to the common lands pathways, was approximately the 45-foot spacing. And what's interesting about that is when you're in the middle, you actually are drawn toward the next light, and the light behind you has just finished illuminating your way. So it was considered to be a way of, and I think in this photograph, they're actually a little bit closer than 45 feet. But what it does is it doesn't cause your pupil, to contract as much, and so you still have your night vision, but it illuminates the pathway. So essentially, that's a basic overview as I see it.
Great. We're open to questions now. I can't see everybody, so.
Oh, Sasha has a question.
Great, thank you, Sasha.
I'm just curious about what keeps the lawnmower people from running over them.
Right. The lights are they would be embedded in a concrete bollard or a post, and the light would not just be a flimsy 1-inch diameter metal stem. Instead, it would be set into the concrete. That one of the specifications we requested was that TROSA with their riding mower won't just mow it down, not to mention a dog walker pulling it over. The concrete posts could also be, and keep in mind the posts themselves are maybe 12 inches tall, maybe 14. And then you have above that the lighting fixture itself that's into the hole. It could be wood. It could be a 6x6 treated post or a 4x4, depending on the location. If no one sends a mower down some of these pathways, this probably doesn't have to be as sturdy, unless you want to consider dog walkers. And I think this is part of the details that we can certainly discuss.
Next question is Betsy. Betsy, unmute yourself, please.
Yes, I guess I'd like to know if you had asked about motion sensing for the lights so they don't have to be on all the time.
Yeah, actually, we did. One of the companies that originally showed up, because we saw maybe 5 different companies, talked about that. The company that's been the one that has really done the 2 demos and has really been the one to not shy away from this whole when I think some of the companies left when we were like comparing, we got specific, and I said, we want a certain number of fixtures, and that's where I settled on the original number. That way we could have a level playing field. Okay, so this has been the one company really and they said, he goes, no, that's not going to work. If I'm going to put this out there, if you know otherwise, anybody here, please weigh in on this. Not necessarily right now, but later, because he said these don't work for individual fixtures. And I am open to all suggestions, based on, I understand that there are street lights in certain cities, Sheffield, England, that operate like on that basis. And so it certainly is workable, but I'm not sure of the technology. So
Betsy, one of the problems with motion sensing is then you lose one of the features of this, which is outlining the path. And so you wouldn't see the lights that are 100 feet away and show you the path.
Right. I understand that.
Next question is Chad. And Chad, unmute yourself, please.
Thanks. Thank you guys for the work that you've done. I have 3 questions. You don't need to answer them now. I would appreciate it if you would, answer them at some point in the process. Which side of the path are the lights going to be on? What's the calculus that you will use to decide which side of the path the lights are going to go on? Where is the conduit? Are you running conduit on both sides of the path, or is conduit on one side, or is it in the middle of the path? And then finally, I'm very happy to hear that you've built an expandable system, or that's what you would like to do. That makes a lot of sense to me. And I'm interested in knowing how many extra spare lights you're going to acquire when you get the fixtures, so that we can move them around as necessary, add one if we need to, etc. So which side of the path are the lights on? Where's the conduit run, or is it on both sides? How many extra spares are you going to buy? And then finally, I noticed that the path leg from the path at the upper meadow to the head of Blue Bottle was not shown on the map as receiving a light. And so I'm asking if there will be a light at the head of Blue Bottle. Thank you.
Okay, I can answer these right now or later.
Alan, they're pretty quick, so please go ahead and answer them now.
Okay, so last question first, at the head of Blue Bottle, the reason that there's no light there was to save a little money. We've noticed that the lights that you, Chad, had spec'd about 5 years ago, those solar lights, one of them could be moved from where it's in the shady area on one of the paths to the head of that at the top of Blue Bottle. So it would be a little extra expense to run the wire down there. We decided it didn't need to be, since it was an open area and would accommodate a solar light. Regarding the wire, there will be strategic areas where dummy wires are going to be put into where they're capped off on both sides underneath the path. So between these dummy, let's say 8 feet long conduit with wire inside of them to hook up extra wires, you'll also be able to pull from a wire that's on the side of the path. Rather than running wire down both sides of every path, which is a tremendous expense with 10 gauge copper wire, which is what you need to support the lights at the end of the line where there's a voltage drop. So because of that, it's instead of the necessity of doing that, what you do is you put in at certain areas the dummy conduit with the wires underneath that could be hooked up later, and any other area on either side of the path that needs to be hooked up, would be hooked up from the next nearest wire, the next nearest junction point. So I hope that answers it.
Great. Other questions? It looks like Matt and Mary have a hand up. Oh, you actually do, but
I'm sorry, SK has her hand up.
I was wondering if I guess there's an openness or a possibility to do something like a Christmas light timer situation where we could shut the lights off at a certain time.
Yes.
Right. The timer is made by the people who make the little timers we all buy for $10. This is like, from what I understand, an $80 to $100 timer, a celestial type timer. It can be set in a number of different ways and it can be reset. One of the ways it can be set would be to following when the sunrise and sunset, or you can set it up for, let's say, at sunset and then to go on for several hours past there. We can set our own hours. It can be timed for the exact hour. It can be timed to be in conjunction with the sun and sunset, that sort of thing. So apparently it's a fairly sophisticated timer that is used in many places and it seems to be very reliable. That would also be inside the cabinet outside the common house. And that's all I know about it.
Thanks. Bennett, could you unmute yourself, please?
Was there any solar option pursued?
As far as I know, if you have solar, then you need a battery in general. The solar lights that we have on the premises right now have a battery inside of them. So it's not like impossible to set up what you're talking about. It would just be more reliable to have it connected to electricity.
So Bennett, we have paths that are very deeply shaded, and it'd be extremely different. We would have to have a separate solar panel outside of those paths, and the cost of that is prohibitive. It actually is cheaper to do it this way.
Okay.
other questions? Okay. So I will move on to the next part, which is the surfaces of the paths. Okay, that's not what I want. Wait a minute, hang on. That's the wrong one. Hang on one second. Okay, I've got it. So the paths committee, the subcommittee working on surfaces was basically Tom and I. We spoke with a number of different contractors who came out and looked at things, and Tom and I went and looked at their work and looked at examples of the different types of surfaces. And so this is a report on what we found. Again, just to remind you, the criteria that we wanted to keep in mind were that they're easy maintenance.
Could you share your screen, please?
Oh, I thought I was. Hang on one second.
No.
Thank you. Let me. Share screen.
And then click on the window.
How are we now?
You did it.
Okay. So the criteria are that it's easy maintenance, that it's durable and has a long lifespan, that it's beautiful, that it has an appropriate environmental impact, that it's accessible, and that it's affordable. So, excuse me for one second. Okay. So we looked into what the possible path surfaces were that would meet those criteria. And we came up with 3 groups. One is to restore the existing surface, or to use a system called grid and gravel, which would end up looking the same. We had several different concrete options, and then a pavers option. Each of these alternatives are going to be presented on separate slides in the following few slides. So Tom and I sought out multiple bids from local companies for each type of surface. We went and looked at examples of many of them, and we feel pretty confident that the bids that we got are accurate. And one thing we can keep in mind is that all of the bids and any path surface that is chosen, the contractor will do the following. They'll remove the current top level of grit. They'll level the surface with appropriate pitching to allow water runoff. They'll install a weed barrier if appropriate, and they'll remove the old materials from the premises. So the first choice is to restore the existing surface, which is Chapel Hill gravel. It's a decomposed granite. They would scrape off the top, correct any sorts of leveling that they needed to do, install weed barrier and metal edging. We currently have mostly plastic edging, and then install the gravel on top. So the pros are that it's long lasting. The current path is about 20 years old. It's attractive and it's nice to walk on. Some of the cons are that it needs regular maintenance and weeding, and that as the path becomes older, more grit is loose and it's available to be walked into our houses. So similarly, there's a stabilizing grid that can be put down with the gravel put into the grid. After grading and leveling, a weed barrier is installed, and then a stabilizing grid is put down and filled with any sort of gravel that you like. The grid prevents the filler from moving around or washing away. So pros for this are that any ruts are reduced, gravel remains in place, there's no need to regrade, very little need to refill. It's very low maintenance, and there's little weed growth from underneath, and it stays cool. The cons are that it's, as gravel, it's not that comfortable for bare feet, and you can get weed growth from the top as dirt and debris settles on the top. And this is a picture that shows a little bit about how it's installed. The ground is prepared, the grid is put down, and then the gravel is spread over it. And on the right, you can see an example of what it can look like. And it's very durable. Cars can drive on it, obviously. So then we come to the concrete options, and the first one is plain concrete. We all know what it looks like. It's low maintenance. It's very durable. Concrete sidewalks have lifespans of 30 to 75 years. It's a cooler surface to walk on in the summer. It's easy to sweep or shovel in the fall and winter, and weeds don't grow through it. The cons are that it can crack over time if not installed well. And if that happens, then the entire section has to be replaced if it's damaged. And plain concrete is susceptible to visible staining from leaves. So we're pretty familiar with that. Another type of concrete is colored concrete. It's pretty much the same pros and cons as plain concrete, but it's a different color, so it would look different. And leaf staining probably wouldn't show up as much. And there's a wide variety of shades that are available for colored concrete. And a third choice in the concrete family is a stamped and colored concrete. It's pretty much the same pros and cons, but it can be more decorative. Leaf staining won't show up very much. And borders and colors and designs can be changed as you like throughout the project. So one end of the path can be a little bit different from the other end of the path if you like. This is an example. The one here looks like brick, or it can look like pavers. They have different colored borders around it if you like. The one on the left here has been stamped with some like plant materials. So they look like leaves, and mostly leaves are, I guess, leaves and flowers. And Tom and I went out to look at some work that the contractor, one of the contractors we were talking to, actually installed in Cary, North Carolina. They look like pavers, and you can see that they have expansion lines in them to help control cracking. And then they can follow any curve that you want, and upkeep on them is pretty easy. We went to the Museum of Life and Science, and these are concrete edging that have had plant material stamped into them as well. And the one on the right is just a sidewalk that they stamped some leaves into. And then our third option is pavers. They can be concrete, brick, or stone, and they're installed on a carefully prepared base. The pros are that there's a variety of designs available. It's easy to replace individual pavers in case of breakage. You don't have the curing time that you have with concrete. They have a very long lifespan. They're pretty easy to keep clean in terms of like getting leaves and debris off of them, and they're comfortable to walk on. Some of the cons are that weeds can grow in the cracks from the top, from dirt settling in between. They can move if you have tree roots growing underneath, or if you have frost heaving and you need to resand between the joints every few years. It says unless you use polymer sand, but I don't recommend that. But here's some of the looks that you can get. There's actual bricks, there's concrete pavers, and stone. This is one that it was a different contractor, but that the contractor had actually put in this path out in Graham, North Carolina, using pavers. So we made a chart to compare the criteria across each of the types of surface. And again, it's ease of maintenance, ease of repairs, accessibility, durability, aesthetics, the ecological impact, and then the cost. So the aesthetics, we're not really going to address so much. I think each of us will have our own preference of what we think looks nice. So I have a column there because we did try to keep that in mind, but it'll be up to each of us to say what we like. Under ecological impact, however, I wanted to talk about that real briefly. So paths are basically impervious surfaces, and there's two ways to think about the paths in our community. Our community is taxed on the amount of impervious surfaces that we have here in Solterra, and that is included in our utility bill, which is how it's taxed in Durham. But our path is already labeled as impervious, so it won't change that at all. It won't change the amount that we pay in utility bills. The other is that the type of soil that we have here, the clay type of soil, is pretty impervious just on its own. So our water basically is running off our path into our ditches and into our drainage systems. So no matter what type of surface we choose, it'll be a similar impact. So the first one was to restore the path to its original look by pulling up the surface and putting a new surface down. So in terms of maintenance, we would need to weed as needed, maybe a little more aggressively than we've been weeding in the past. Ease of repairs, you can dig out and replace grit and underlayers if there's some reason that you need to do that. It's moderately accessible. It's good for walking on. It's not as good for wheelchairs or rollers. Ours has lasted about 20 years, so it's pretty durable. And then again, the aesthetics and the ecological impact I just addressed. And we'll look at the costs in just a minute. The second choice is the grid and gravel. And it needs weeding basically about as much as the original path does. And it's a little harder to repair because you would also have to cut out and remove grid and replace the grid if you need to replace some part of the path. It's also moderately accessible and also would last about 20 years. So plain concrete is very easy to maintain. If something did break, which our paths are not heavy use, there's no vehicles running on them. We don't really have much tree root growing most of the place. So we wouldn't really probably have too much breakage. and need to replace parts. But if we did, we'd have to take a whole section of concrete out and a new one installed. It is very accessible. It will last from 30 to 75 years. The color concrete is the same. And the stamped and colored concrete is also very easy to maintain, very accessible, and lasts a very long time. And our last choice was the pavers, the brick or concrete pavers. You would have some weeding as needed from growth from the top. It's easy to pull up and replace your pavers if you need to. Should be very accessible, and pavers can last 50 or more years. So that's the comparison of those criteria. And now
Nancy, it's Cheryl. I just want to say there's 29 minutes left to the meeting.
Great, thank you very much. Okay, so costs. This is where we're all going to do a little gasping and a little clutching of our pearls. And the Paths Committee has kind of gotten used to looking at the numbers that you're going to see. And we worked with a variety of contractors, so we really think that we're in the ballpark. And we did get various bids from the contractors. So as you look at these, you'll frequently see a range, and that's because, you know, we talked to more than one person and got more than one price. But the drainage came in that the drainage, as Matt showed you, would be in the $13,000 to $18,000 range for the total job. And that depends in part upon what path surface we actually choose, and also what they find when they actually start the digging and start to do the work. But the contractors were pretty confident that it would be in that range. The lighting was in the $24,000 to $59,000 range. It depends partly on the exact numbers of fixtures we purchase and a little bit on the style of fixtures that we pick. So I made a chart for this. The first numbers you'll see will be the cost for the surface, and then the lighting and drainage and the total range. So the first one is if we restore the path to their original condition, the surface would cost $48,000 for the work of scraping it all off and putting and regrading and putting down weed barrier and replacing or putting in new grit, new gravel. The lighting is that range, the drainage costs the same, and the total range would be from $85,000 to $121,000. The grit and gravel system is $84,000, and the other costs the same, and so we have a range of $121,000 to $157,000. You move on to the concrete suggestions. Plain concrete would be from $75,000 to $118,000, with a total cost of $112,000 to $191,000. The colored concrete range from $78,000 to $91,000, with a total range of $115,000 to $164,000. The stamped and colored concrete is $117,000 to $167,000, with a total price range of $154,000 to $240,000. And the pavers would cost from $130,000 to $250,000, and a total range of $167,000 to $323,000. So there's a lot of variability in what the cost would be, and even among the, like if you look at the concrete, there looks like a big variety there, and there is. So we would work to get the best price with the best work that we could. But this is what we found. This is the information that we gathered. So the next steps are that we would like you all to ask clarifying questions of the Path Committee, and we would provide those clarifications by mid-February to the entire community. The committee asks the community to discuss and narrow down your choices to one or two. We'd like you to discuss it with your neighbors, just kind of socially and on your own for a while before the February community meeting. And at the February community meeting, we'll have a more formal way of discussing this. And we will discuss it as long as we need to make a decision. I mean, like we may go into March or April to do that. We're hoping it won't take quite that long, but we have that option. The PATH committee will work up a more complete proposal for 1 or 2 selections and address all the community questions. So if you come back and say, we want ABC to go with this, we can go back to the contractors and get a firmer price based on the changes that you've asked us to make. We'll make a final proposal to the committee, to the community for a final decision, and then the PATH committee's job would be finished, and the board, at some point before then, probably, the board will appoint a committee to determine the next steps, which would include financing. So we hope that we have something beautiful when we're done, and we're really looking forward to giving you the information you need to make some decisions. So we have about 10 minutes now for people to ask questions.
Chad is the first one with a hand.
Thank you. So 3 questions, all of which you can answer later if necessary. The first question is, did you look at asphalt as a possibility? The second question is, and this is probably my biggest concern, almost every house in the neighborhood, as far as I can tell, has their cable access running across the path. How did any of the contractors talk about the steps that they will take to ensure that cable service is maintained during construction? Now that we're all working from home and through the internet, a multi-day outage is a real concern. And then finally, when you're talking with people, was there any discussion about how damage to personal elements would be handled? For example, some people have stones that come right up to the path edge. Some people have walkways that come right up to the path edge. I assume that maybe it's premature to think that you guys discussed that. I don't need to know now. I just want you at some point to answer. We looked at it. We didn't look at it. We'll make sure that gets factored into how we go. Is that something that the homeowners are going to be responsible for, or is that something that the contractor will do? So
those are great questions, Chad. Thank you. We'll definitely address that in the committee and get back to you. I'll get back to everybody.
Next one up is Betsy. Betsy, unmute, please.
Nancy, I just have to clarify. You stated that our soils are impervious. That's not true. No soil is impervious. They can become temporarily impervious when it's very dry, and they can also get saturated and you have runoff then, but our soils are not impervious. So if we add an impervious surface, we are going to be having an environmental impact from that.
Okay, thank you.
Any other hands? I don't see other hands. You can use your physical hand if you want.
Sasha.
Can you just clarify at some point, is there already some money somewhere in a budget that's part of this? And what are the possibilities of paying this over 10 to 20 years, that sort of thing? And I can't remember if you just had we'll just do the drainage and leave the paths sort of as is.
So Sasha, there's a longer answer to that, but let me give you a real short answer. There is a capital fund that we've been building into. I don't know the amount in it. And the job of the PATH committee was to come up with options. The job of the committee, not yet to form, will be looking into the possible finance paths. And so that's for the future.
It's a good question, though.
Yeah.
Who else has a question here? Oh, there's Judith.
Judith.
Great.
This is not so much a question as a comment. You're kidding yourself if you think we can control weeds without using weed killer. They will come up through the pavers. They're a constant problem in the front of my house. And I know they did a good job putting down weed barrier, but you get constant sediment settling on paths, and those pavers will be a disaster as, you know, as far as weeds.
Okay, thank you.
Shahar.
That the answer about we're going to have a committee to look at the financial part, is that going to be in between? Is that going to be before the next time we have a discussion about this?
No, what Nancy laid out was that we decide on which path, you know, which option the community likes. Once that's fixed, then we can start worrying about financing. The reason we didn't want to do that beforehand was we wouldn't know the price. And
Actually, Brand, let me tweak that
Right.
just a little. We did talk about establishing a finance committee, maybe perhaps next month after the board has met again. The board talked about maybe doing this. I've actually already started conversations with Lane and with Matt about finances to gather some preliminary information about how much money we have, what are the options to finance that. So that's beginning, but we're going to have a committee. So anybody who's interested in that part of it can let the board know. And after the next board meeting, it might be the time that we start the finance committee. But you can't do anything specific because there is a broad range in those costs. So it's starting on a very small basis right now. Judith?
So is there any consideration, and maybe this is still too early, of phasing this stuff? Because it's going to be hugely expensive, whatever we do.
Judith, we've been working on this for 4 years now. So, you know, this is not going to happen overnight, but we got to continue and honor the work that people have been doing over the last 4 years.
And the PATH committee has been working for a year on this.
That didn't answer my question. My question was, is there any consideration of doing it in pieces, in phases?
Oh. Yeah, I would think that that's a decision for the next committee.
Well, yeah, the board can discuss
Right.
that well, I think. The PATH committee was tasked with giving this information to the community and then, you know, honing the information further. And so it's not up to the PATH committee to decide how to implement the plan. It's up to the board to kind of take the next step. So I think that's a valid question and can be brought to the board.
Right.
Yeah. I know I'm wearing 2 hats, but right now I'm in my PATH hat, so.
Sasha.
I just want to say it was very impressive presentation.
Thank you. We've all put a lot of work into this. I mean, Tom met with a lot of people. We've met with many, many people, and it was really hard through COVID times to get people. Like, we started with people and they dropped out. Some people went out of business. Some people, you know, didn't come to meetings and things. So it's taken a lot of perseverance by this group, and I'm pretty impressed by them. So good job, colleagues. Who else has a question? Okay, so let me get my note here. Well, I can't find exactly my notes, what I wanted to do next, but the PATH committee will put these questions together and get answers to them and get them out to you in writing. This stuff will be sent to you electronically and be available for you to look at. If you have, as questions come up in the next couple of weeks, please, you know, contact the PATH committee, which can, I would say Brand or me probably be the 2 you'd want to get in touch with first. On a different note, the board has changed their meeting days to Tuesdays. So we're meeting on the second Tuesday of each month. Everybody is welcome to come to the board meetings. So the next one is February, I think it's the 9th. And then the next meeting, community meeting, will be February 28th on a Sunday, starting at 4:30. And a lot of that will be taken up with discussion of the paths. But anything else that you want on the agenda for that meeting, please get in touch with the board. Send a note to the board for agenda items. Board members, am I forgetting anything? Path members, am I forgetting anything? Okay. Well, we're actually getting out a little bit early. How about that? So thank you, everybody. I really appreciate all the thoughtful questions and all the good listening. So
Great job.
see you around.
Yes,
Thank
thank you
you.
everyone who worked on it. It was really great.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Night.